All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our second webinar in this series, Introduction to Video-Based Bat Emergence Surveys for White Nose Syndrome Monitoring. Thank you all for joining again today. The response has been tremendous. Hopefully most of you were able to see the first webinar, but if not, you can go back and watch that. So today we're going to be continuing right where we left off. As you're watching, please put your questions in the Q&A. There's also a chat, but if you have specific questions, put those in there. We're going to have specific places in the webinar today where I'll be answering your questions. About the first half is going to be a PowerPoint showing more of how to use the software, and then we're going to have a live demo for the second half showing really what you can do. So the first webinar, if you want to rewatch it, it is posted on our website at thrutrackeranalytics.com/presentations. And I will be posting a recording of this webinar there later today. So quick review from last time to catch up on what we covered. We spent some time talking about why we want to use thermal imaging for monitoring bats, or different kinds of imaging techniques for monitoring bats. We talked about different cameras we can use, how to deploy cameras in the field, and different use cases as far as bat boxes, buildings, bridges, and caves. Now we're going to build off of that in today's webinar, with our main focus being the nuts and bolts of how to use the software itself. I'm going to start with 3 case studies to highlight how we might be using the software in different ways, because your use case might be different from others. And so I want you to have some idea of the possibilities there. We're going to focus on the main workflow, how to dial in the settings to get the results that you want. Outputs and tools, different kinds of visualizations we can make as far as review images, review videos, classifiers, the vetting tools. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about some of the additional pieces that we haven't really had time to go into in detail. And believe it or not, even in 2 hours, we're not able to cover everything that I would like to. So on that note, I'm intending this to be more of a demonstration than a click-by-click walkthrough. So this will be recorded. If you're a little bit unclear as to the exact steps to get the outputs, then we're going to have additional videos that will really slow it down for you. But for the sake of time today, I'm going to be giving a little bit more of an overview in some places where there's different options. So if you're not 100% able to replicate that should be normal. Okay, so as a reminder, our mission at ThruTracker Analytics is to protect wildlife by making video surveys mainstream. And by you being here and participating, you're helping us with that mission. So thank you for showing up, participating, and sharing with others this exciting technology. So last time we talked about 3 main applications for why you might want to use videography for studying bats and other wildlife. First would be emergence counts. Second, occupancy, and third would be behavior. So I have some example projects, some of which talked about a little bit last time, and I wanted to go into a little bit more detail on those projects, as well as show the specific outputs as far as review images and review videos that would be most useful for the aims of that particular project. And this is to really demonstrate the different workflows that we're working towards. And then after that, I will start diving into the software itself and how to generate those outputs. All right, so the first project is with monitoring bats in response to field trials of vaccine efforts. So as many of you know, there is now a vaccine for white nose syndrome, and this was developed by Dr. Tony Roque at USGS. And especially in the Western United States, these vaccines are now being applied to a number of different populations. And the goal is to then see in the field if those populations applying the vaccine is having an effect on the population level compared to potential control sites. So this is a good example of a situation where primary emphasis is going to be on counting the bats and counting a colony year after year to see that progression or change or lack of change in the population size. So this really highlights that emphasis on counting. So at one of the sites that I've been involved with, I did get to meet Dr. Roki just a couple nights ago, and we got to apply some vaccine to a couple of hundred bats, which was pretty exciting. And monitoring that population, these are the kind of outputs that ThruTracker is going to give. Obviously, the count value, and I will go into a little bit of detail here. So this are one of the figures that is automatically generated whenever you do a count in ThruTracker, and this illustrates some of the methodology involved. So we have our virtual roost exit on our video, and so we're counting the number of bats that are exiting and returning to the roost over time, because often you see bats going out, coming back in, so we need to keep track of those. This graph here on the left, the red line is showing the number of bats over time that are going out. The green line is showing the number of bats that are coming back in. And the blue dashed line is really what we care about. That is the net number of bats that have exited. So if we track this over time, that net number as bats start coming back in more later on is going to start going down. So usually what we use is what we call the maximum net emergence, and that is the number that ThruTracker is going to display after you process a video with the gate count on. This also shows on the bottom here the number of exits per minute. So you can see the time profile. In this case, the first 15 minutes or so of the recording had a pretty high emergence rate, and you can see the bats coming out in these clusters, which is pretty typical. And then as time goes on, that decreases, and after about 30 minutes into the recording, at that point, the number of bats that are exiting and the number of bats that are returning is about the same. So both of those are going up, and the net emergence rate is no longer increasing. So that is kind of one of our main workflows that we're going to be working on and showing today. This is another visual. I think I showed a similar one that is really useful in this case because we were interested in capturing this bats. So being able to visualize the flight trajectories of the bats kind of all at once is really helpful here because we can have an idea of how many bats are exiting from each exit. And this helped us in setting up our heart traps for catching these bats. All right, second project I wanted to highlight is one by the Yolo Basin Foundation. This is a nonprofit educational institution in Sacramento, California. And part of what they do are these educational tours where they take people out and show them emergences of thousands and thousands of Mexican free-tailed bats. So they are interested and starting to adopt using ThruTracker as part of their educational outreach. Now, they are interested in getting counts of the bats, and we're helping them with that, but that is more of a secondary priority in this case, whereas the outreach component showing the underlying science is primary. So in this case, these are some of the videos that they've been able to take. And this is showing the counting process. So they can use these in their presentations and as well as during their bat walks. So tracking videos, as well as visuals. These are some of the visuals we're able to produce. And obviously, they're rather striking images, at least in my opinion, and having those visuals to kind of really capture an audience attention can be helpful. So these are sort of things that we are working on presenting. And what's neat is you can see some of the collective behavior of the animals, and Mexican free-tailed bats do this characteristic kind of wobbling maneuver as they go through. So I think this image kind of captures some of that, could be used in an educational context. The third project and last one I wanted to highlight is one that is led by Keith Van Gordon at the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire. And Keith got in touch to share some work that they've been doing, and this has really been pretty cool. So they are monitoring hibernacula in the fall into the winter season using long-term video recording. And so they're using an Axis camera here with a large battery that they're able to deploy in the field and record for most of the night, all night, for weeks or even months at a time. So in this particular case, the goal was more about looking at more of the behavior of the animals. They are starting to want to get counts, but initially the goal was just figuring out when were bats present, what sort of behaviors were being exhibited, and trying to get information that could help with locating the hibernacula. So this kind of highlights another workflow we might use and different outputs that we might want to use. And so in this case, having the tracking images can really be helpful. And these are ones that we produced from the video they presented. I should say that Keith and his collaborators have been working on this a number of years, and we were not involved with the initial data collection, but we're happy to share with them different things that we can do with the video that they have and plan for future projects. So this is an example review image. You can see different behaviors, different locations where the bats are flying. And importantly, all of this data is being stored. So we have the underlying coordinates of the positions, and we can process that in various ways that can help with the objectives of the project. So this is one of the outputs that we produced. This is just from a sample of video clips that were provided. And so we can show overlays on the top left quadrant here. We can show overlays of all of the trajectories. And this kind of gives an idea of how the bats are flying, where they're flying. And then on the top right, we can plot density plots of the locations of those tracks. So you can see in the bottom middle of the screen is a high density of tracks. So if I was going to go out to this site and look for the hibernacula, I'd be very interested to look uphill there in that location, perhaps put some additional video cameras in that area. On the bottom, we can also plot the distribution of the start points of the tracks, which is shown in green, and the endpoints of the tracks, which is shown in red. And interestingly, the distribution is a little bit different than just the trajectories. The track start points in this subset of data start to or have a higher density on the left side of the screen, whereas the endpoints are more towards the bottom and the right side of the screen. So this can help us give some inference. Depending on if this was at the beginning of the night, that could indicate some directional flow. Or we could do this later in the night and see if we could get evidence of, how they're returning to the roost. So these are the kind of things that we can generate because we have access to all the underlying data. And now we can do more and more with that, especially for these larger scale projects. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful context as we start to dive into the software itself. And I wanted to take a moment here to use this to kind of highlight how we have thought about developing ThruTracker, and that we have three primary design objectives. Our first one is to make the software as easy to learn as possible so we can increase the adoption rate. So we want the workflow to be intuitive, and within maybe an hour or two of training, if you have decent quality video, to be able to get useful results. In addition, we want it to be fast and accurate, obviously, so that you're not having to spend a lot of time waiting for the data to be processed and you can trust in the results. And we want research-grade outputs. We want to be able to produce figures and videos that could be presented in reports, publications, outreach materials, etc. So you can see that is a lot to do all in one package. And in some cases, we're trying to gear this simultaneously for a beginner and for somebody who wants to really get professional level outputs. All right, so I'm going to take a minute here to see if any questions popped up before we start diving into the software itself.
The only question we have so far is from Michael Baker, excuse me, about a preliminary count for the YOLO Causeway. If you just have a ballpark idea of how many bats were there, if you could share that.
Yeah, great question. And unfortunately, I don't have that number. So far, only a clip of video was sent for me to establish the initial processing. And so I have processed that and sent the configuration file back to them, and they're processing that currently. So I do not have any numbers on the YOLO Basin Causeway, but hopefully we will soon. Okay, well, I can tell people are saving their questions until we can kind of dive into the software. So let's just go ahead and do that.
I actually have a
Something
couple
else?
more questions that came up while you were answering. So,
Okay, perfect.
first is, can you expand more on the potential use of ThruTracker in more natural systems to find roosts? And one more after that.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a frontier, and I think that this can be challenging for sure. If we go back to a situation here, like we have a large landscape, and I think we can use multiple approaches here. As I talked about last time, I would suggest if you're in a natural environment, ideally use some time before you go out and try to just set up equipment to do some scouting. So having some thermal imagers that you can use as like a monocular that you can go out into the environment. And you want to do this ideally at dusk when the bats are going to be most active. I was just in a situation that was like this, and there were several different houses. We didn't know where the bats were roosting, and having some thermal imaging just to kind of scout around at first can be really helpful. And then once you have an idea of where you think the bats are, then you can use some of these more sophisticated techniques to actually set out the equipment and collect data that can help hone in on that approach. But admittedly, it's a challenge for sure. Hopefully this technology can help.
Awesome. And then are there any peer-reviewed publications that have used the software yet?
Yes. So on our website, you can go to ThruTrackerAnalytics.com/publications, and there are several publications there that you can check out. All right, shall we continue? All right, let's dive in. So I'm going to give an overview of the workflow, and then I'm going to do an actual demonstration in the software and see what we have time for as far as showing it off on different clips. So you can go to ThruTrackerAnalytics.com right now and download the software and do a 10-day free trial. If you've already used a free trial in the past, we can provide an extension for that. And again, we have those 2-year licenses available for anybody who's doing white nose syndrome related monitoring. So you can access the software right now. When you download the software, and we have that for Windows and for Mac, you can open it up, and this is the first screen that you're going to see. To orient you, we have tabs on the top here. The first one is the detection settings. So you're going to open up the program, select the videos for your project, and it's going to look something like this. So the first step is we're going to go through and choose the settings for processing a video. Now, we have worked really hard to get this dialed in to have the minimum number of settings that still give you the flexibility that you need to process different kinds of videos. The first one is a sensitivity dial. So this is basically telling the program how prominent or how bright of a target are we dealing with compared to the background. So do we have a really bright bat on a dark background, which would mean you want to use a low sensitivity value, or are we trying to find really faint detections? Second is target size. So this is an estimate of the diameter or the size of the bat in pixels. And we have a tool that lets you just draw the circle on the bat, or you can show a range of sizes. And the third one is an indicator of the density of bats. So we have low, medium, and high that correspond to different numbers of bats that are visible at a given time in the video. Now, I'll walk through an example, but I just want to kind of show through that conceptually. All right, so you're going to set these settings in here, and then when you're done with that, we can advance to the next step, and I will show an example in a second here. The next step is to process the actual video. So you can process a single video. You can also have the option of just doing part of a video if you want. You can specify a frame range, or you can do batch processing. So if you have several videos you want to process all at the same time, you can do that. You can also specify different kinds of outputs that you want to get from these videos here. So if you've already processed a video, you can go to this screen and make additional review videos showing different kinds of overlays. And I'll show you some of those. At the bottom here, this is something we've more recently added, is a way of keeping track of all of your runs. So every time you process a video or a set of videos, it's going to keep track of that because sometimes you might want to reprocess it with different settings. It's going to keep track of those runs for you down here and have a summary of the outputs. You can make notes about the quality of that tracking. And then usually when we're finished, we mark the final one so that you can come back to it and you know which is the one that you want to keep in the end. Once you process a video, the next step is the tracking review. So this is the third tab up here, and this is going to bring up a plot of the detections on the bottom and a overlay video on the top. At this point, you can play that video, and this is an additional stage of review where we can watch the tracks, make sure that qualitatively it all looks good. If you're noticing some issues here, you might want to go back to your detections settings and reprocess a video and do another run. All right, when you're happy with your run, the next step, and this is optional, I don't always do this, but at this point, you can classify tracks or review the tracks in various ways. This is showing one of the outputs, and we've classified the tracks, in this case, based on the bats that were leaving the front of this house, a side window, and the attic. And so there's various tools in here to do this. In this stage, we can also make additional review images like the ones that I showed earlier. The fifth step, again, this is also optional, but recommended if you're doing counts, which is a vetting step. And this is a step that we added to generate an accuracy for each project. And that's how I recommend thinking about this. Like ThruTracker does not have a specific accuracy in general. Every project, every run is going to have its own accuracy. And so we can get an estimate of that using this tool. So quick overview of how that works is that in ThruTracker, you can specify how many videos and how long of videos of these vetting clips to make. Usually these are short, 10 to 30 seconds. It's going to make review videos that have the bounding box overlaid onto the video. Then you watch the videos. You can slow it down, go frame by frame if you need to, count the bats as they're crossing your bounding box. And then you enter the manual counts into ThruTracker and it will tell you your accuracy. And then that is going to stay with your project. And that can help inform NABat or other people as to the accuracy of your count for that particular project. All right, at that point, you can finalize the project and share it if you would like. This is another recent feature that we have added, which is that if you want to, this is optional, you can log into your account in ThruTracker, and this will have all of your data that is stored securely online, and you can make a project that is stored online. It'll basically have a website for that project that you can easily share with people. Now, again, you don't have to use this if you're in a secure setting where you're on a lockdown laptop or something like that. You can do everything locally, but this has been really nice. When people send me their projects, I can process it and then send them a website, and it has all of the summary data. It has a video, it has the review images, and then people can go there and download them themselves or share it with their colleagues or however they would like to. So that is an overview of the workflow. If there are any quick questions, feel free to put those in the chat. And Kristen, if you want to ask those, let me know. Otherwise, I am going to actually bring up ThruTracker and show you step by step how this works on an actual example.
There's no new questions waiting right now, so go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so again, this is the interface. Hopefully you can see it all right. When you open it up, you can either load a project you've already been working on or start a new project. So in this case, I just went to File, New Project, and I'm going to create a project. I usually keep all the projects by default. It's in a folder in your Documents folder on your computer. And so each project is going to have a folder, and all the data are going to be in subfolders in that location. So you can specify where you want that to be here. You can also name your project. So I'm just going to call this webinar example 1. You can make some notes. About your project here, and then I'm going to hit OK. And now it's going to ask me for the videos that we're going to use for the project. We can either make a copy of the video and copy it into the project, or you can keep the video in the location where it is. So I'm going to do that by clicking Reference in Place. And I'm going to select my video. You can choose one or more videos. So I'm just going to click one video here, but you could do a whole batch of videos if you wanted to. And hit OK. And now it's loaded the first frame of my video here. And to orient you, you can now play the video. You can pause it. You can adjust the speed of playback. And you can go frame by either clicking on these arrows, or I like to use the shortcut keys, just the arrows on your keyboard. And you can go frame by frame through your video to look at what's going on. That's the first thing I do when I watch a video, is to just kind of watch it and get a feel for what I'm looking at. Now, once I've done that, we're just going to go step by step on the right here. So you can select your video. If you had multiple videos, you can choose which one you're processing. We just have one for now, so you don't have to worry about that. There is a configuration or a settings file for your project. Most of the time, you can pretty much ignore that. But if you wanted to import the settings from another project, you could do that here. All right, now we have our first setting, which is the target diameter. So our goal here is to draw this green circle over the size of a typical bat that we're tracking in the video. So here's where, watching it, I'm just going to find, so this bat over here looks pretty good to me. I'm going to click on it with my cursor. And then just to show you, you can also zoom in here. So you have an idea of what we're actually talking about. Now you can see the pixels. So this is looking pretty good to me. It's 15 pixel diameter. And we could, if this actually looks pretty good, we could make it bigger, we can make it smaller. In this case, I'm just going to be tracking the white center part of the bat's body. You could also track the black wings, but in this case, if we zoom out, you can pretty much always see the bat's body. So I'm just going to be tracking the white part of the bats, or the lighter part. So you can set that here with target polarity. And we're going to specify that I just want to be getting the light target on a dark background. If we wanted to also track the wings, because sometimes they will orient in such a way that sometimes you can see the body, sometimes the wings, we could specify both lighter and darker. But in this case, I just want to do the bright bodies of the bat. And again, I'm going to go back to target diameter and make sure my circle looks pretty good. That might be a little bit too big. You just want it to look something like that. All right, the next big one that we talked about is the sensitivity. So this is how distinctive or how much contrast do you get of the target against its background. And this is a really nice recording. You can see the bat's bodies are almost totally white. The background is a pretty dull gray. So I'm going to actually drop the sensitivity to low in this case. The density is going to be the maximum number of bats you can see at a given time. And I'm going to set this to 6 to 20 because sometimes we get more than 5 bats. Next, we're going to draw the bounding box or the gate. So I'm just going to draw it like this. And again, we're thinking about this, that anything inside this box is going to be considered in the roost and anything outside is out of the roost, sort of in a virtual context. And we're just trying to draw this. In this case, the bats are going from the bottom of the screen to the top. So I'm going to put the edges all the way to the side. And then our main line that we're drawing for crossing is just going to be this one here. And the bat's kind of spread out in this case from bottom to top. So I am going to put the line a little bit more towards the top. Okay. And the last thing that we can do is an exclusion zone or a mask. So if there was something that was causing false detections or you had a lot of bats in the background, what I could do is draw a region where we don't want to track the bats. In this case, I don't have that problem, so I'm going to clear this and just track the entire thing. Now that I have my settings in place, we can test this by clicking Test Current Settings, that green button. And it is going to process it over a short clip wherever I had my cursor before. So I moved to a place where I know that there's bats, and it has processed and is just running over, in this case, 200 frames, about 7 seconds. So that looks really good. I can see my settings applied. If I want to change it, what I can do is pause the playback and let's say I want to change the sensitivity so you can see what happens if we put it at very high. Maybe we get more bats. Well, now we can play it and you can see it's putting way too many boxes. We're getting detections on different parts that we don't want them. So we can see very quickly that that's not the setting that we want. So I'm going to go back, put it on low. It's going to reprocess. And just like that, in a few seconds, we can dial in these settings to get them so that qualitatively they look good. All right, so that looks good to me. And now that I'm done, I'm going to click on Save and Advance. That's going to save all of the settings that I have here to my configuration file. You don't have to worry about that, but that's all being done under the hood for you. Now we have advanced to that second tab, and here's where we can process a video. So we just have one video, so I'm obviously going to work within process a single video. I am going to just process a subset of the frames. So I'm going to select process only a frame range, and let's do 600 frames. I'll click process a single video. It's going to give me a whole range of outputs here. For the sake of time, I'm not going to explain all of these, but basically it's allowing you to choose what the overlay video looks like. If you want to have a box overlay, how many trailing boxes you have. I'm going to include the gate overlay because I want to see that. And then there's 3 options for the video output. You can either do the whole video, a tracks only video, so that's going to compress the video to portions where it's only detecting things, or a snapshot review. And so that would do clips, say every 5 seconds out of every minute, and we'll stitch those together. In case you have like a 2-hour video, you don't want to make a review of the whole thing, but that would allow you to inspect portions of the video. I'm going to do the whole video in this case. We also have options for what the color palette is going to be made. So we could make a nice thermal palette if we want. I like to keep it for review in grayscale. That allows the tracking to kind of pop off of the image a little bit. This is already in white hot, which is my preference. So I'm going to keep that there and use those settings and start the run. So this video is 30 frames per second, so 600 frames, 20 seconds video. You can see it's processing it rather quickly. Often we can do an hour of video. It might take 30 minutes to process, depending on the resolution. And there we go. We just counted 167 bats, and it made this nice review image for us. And so I'm going to close this screen by going to the tracking review. And now we've advanced to the third step, which is now we can see the final tracking and play this back. So I'm going to play it back at an even slower speed. And now we can see the full tracking, and we're getting these counting dots. So with the gate count, you can see when a bat crosses out of our box, it is going to make a colored filled in circle where it crossed through, and it's going to show that circle for several frames after the bat passes through. So what I like to do is watch and keep track. So I'm going to start from the beginning here, and it starts tracking. We have the green bat is going to cross first, so we want to make sure we should see a green circle. There it is. And then the blue cyan bat, there's a blue circle. Next we get orange, purple, orange, purple, blue. And then I try to find some, we'll see if we can find a little bit trickier cases. So this is all looking 100% accurate as far as I can tell. Now here is a point, this is a tricky one. So this is what's really helpful is you can go frame by frame and try to find some of these more difficult edge cases. So here we can see there's 3 bats that are approaching our line. There's a red bat, cyan, and purple. And the cyan and purple are going to cross each other's paths. So right there, just as they are crossing the line, there's actually, we know there's 2 bats there, but you can only see one because one of the bats is occluding the other one. So this is going to be a really good test for ThruTracker. Is it able to detect that extra bat? So we should see a third circle count as the bats cross the line. And indeed we do. Right there, we see the red bat, and then we get the cyan and the purple. It was able to track the bats and interpolate and know that there was a bat missing for a frame, but then they split up, and it was able to correctly discern that there was a missed bat for a couple of frames. So this looks really good to me. I'm guessing the accuracy here is very high. I would guess 98% or more, but we could actually test that, which we'll look at next. I didn't explain what was on the bottom graph here, so I'll do that next. This is showing a plot of the number of bats per frame is shown in orange. So in this case, the density is pretty high. It's a pretty short clip. But we can just click on this graph and it will take you right to that part of the video. And we can see that there's 8 bats present here. If we want to go a little bit later, there are only 3 bats here. So you can, if we have an hour-long video, you can see the whole emergence pattern and then very quickly go to the part of the video that you're interested in. The blue line is showing the cumulative exits. So a total sort of tally of how many bats have gone through at a time. Now, I am pretty happy with this, so I'm going to label this excellent here. I can make some comments. Tracking looked really good. No issues I could see. And then since this one did look good to me. I'm not planning on reprocessing it. I'm just going to click this final button, and that's going to sync it to the cloud. And when I go over here to the cloud tab later on, I'll be able to have a website that will have that data. Again, this is optional. You can opt in to this if you want to do it, or just keep it on your computer. Next, since we're happy with everything, we can now visualize those tracks in various ways. And what I like to do is look at all of the tracks, and it's just going to show the trajectories. And we can select the tracks based on any point in the track, their starting position, or their end position. So I'm going to do the start point only, hit OK, and now it's going to plot those 176 tracks for us. And it's already classified the ones that crossed our boundary as exits, and so those are shown in red. The ones that are in gray were not classified as exits, and some of those were because they were at the beginning or the end of the video. But if we wanted to, we could reclassify these. So let's say I'm interested in these tracks that are starting on the right of the image here, and I want to know how many bats are flying over on the right here. So I could just select all of those, and then let's classify them as category 4. And then we could make some notes. That's on right side of image. And all of this is being saved for you. We can apply the classification, and now we can see that there were 8 tracks there. And we've colorized them, so we could go through and select them very quickly to categorize. Let's say there's multiple emergences. This is one way that you can quickly get more insight from your data. This is also where you would generate different review images, but I'm going to show that on the next example. Okay, next we can go to the vetting tab. And this is where we can quickly do a check to verify the accuracy. So far we've been doing qualitative checks along the way. You definitely want to do that. But this will also allow you to do a quantitative vetting of your count. So especially for important data, this is something that you can do in a relatively short amount of time that will help check the accuracy of the counting in this case. So we only did a relatively short clips, but what we can do, I usually would do, say, 3 clips, and I would do a little bit longer, but for this example, I'm just going to do clips that are 5 seconds each because I processed pretty short amount of video there. But this is going to depend on the density of bats. You might do anywhere from a few seconds up to 30 seconds or a minute. And I'm not going to walk through all the options here, but I'm just going to use the default, and we're going to generate the review clips. So this is automatically going through the video. It's finding time periods where there are a relatively high number of bats, and then randomly selecting 3 clips that it's going to produce for manual review. So it just did all that. It's doing this in the background. And now I have the 3 clips that were produced down here, and I can just double click on it. And this is the review video that was just made. So now I can go into full screen mode. And what we're doing is counting the boundary crossings. So this is exactly what ThruTracker is doing. Now we are manually going through it. So see if you can go through this with me, and I'll get my mental count and see if you get the same number. So I'm going to step through, and I'll do it in my brain. You do it in yours. And so just track the bats that are crossing the yellow line from the bottom to the top. Okay, I got 53. Curious what other people got. There was a jump right here that the video skipped a little bit, so I'm not sure if ThruTracker is going to be able to get that. We might have missed those 3 bats, but that's how quickly you can go through and count bats. If you weren't able to do it, that's okay, because I was controlling the buttons, but that's basically what we do. So now I'm going to enter my number here, 53. I would go ahead and do that for the other 2 clips as well. You could see you could probably do all 3 of those in just a few minutes. And when you're done, I don't know how many bats were in these other ones, but I'm just going to make up some numbers here. And when you put that in, we're going to check our accuracy. And look at that. ThruTracker also got 53 for the clip. I promise I did not stage that ahead of time. So we got 100% accuracy on that first clip. The other 2, I made up the numbers, but this would be able to give you your overall accuracy and your accuracy per clip. And it will tell you if you're likely undercounting or overcounting. So in some cases, you might know that you're undercounting a little bit, and you could use that to help inform your estimate of what you think the actual population size is. Okay, now we're basically done with that. So the last step would be, if you want to, you can now go to your cloud here, and we can share this. This is automatically making your own website for that project. And you can click on this, and we have all that data that you can now send to your colleagues. And this would be something that you could also go back to a year later, multiple years later, and you would be able to have all this data available to you and have a quick way of sort of validating the accuracy. It's going to keep track of those vetting numbers and all of that. So I'm going to stop there, see if there are any questions before quickly going through the last example.
Okay, so we had 2 questions that came up. One was about the bounding box, if bats cross to the left or the right of the screen, and so leave outside the frame, if those get counted.
Good question. So this is where understanding how the bounding box and the behavior of the bats works. In this case, I have drawn my bounding box all the way to the edge. So if a bat leaves on the edge, it's not going to count that as an exit. If I wanted that to be the case, I would want to go back here and in my bounding box, if the bats are leaving on the edge, then I would want to pull in my bounding box from the edge so that if they are crossing out of it, now that would count as an exit. In this case, sometimes the bats are coming in from the edge. So if they were coming in from the edge, then that's going to give a different result. I knew that the bats are pretty much going bottom to top for this video, so I'd specifically put my bounding box all the way to the edge.
Awesome. And then we have Donald saying they're just starting with ThruTracker and emergent surveys and finding moving vegetation is causing detections. And they're pretty sure they're not bat, but it's time consuming to manually review the videos. Are there settings that can obscure these items? And does that include moving vegetation?
Yes. So often ThruTracker is able to handle that using just the sensitivity here. So make sure that suppress background is on and that your settings are dialed in. If your sensitivity is too high, then that can be picking up things in the background that you don't need to. If you have really faint detections, then sometimes you need to use more advanced tricks. So if there is, let's say there's vegetation in this corner over here that's moving, and we don't really need to track the bats there, then I could just draw a mask over that, and it's going to avoid triggering detections in that case. There's even more advanced settings that we have, track classifiers and neural network image classifiers that we're still rolling out. So if we really get advanced, then you can do that as well. But I haven't really had to do that except for the most extreme situations. Any other questions?
I think that's it for this stage.
Okay. So I'm going to quickly bring up another project.
Sorry, we got a couple more rolling in about
Okay.
how it deals with moths and target diameter.
Yes. So one of the things that you can do, and I'll show some of the advanced settings here. I'm going to make, let me see. I'm going to do a new project here, and then I'll show some advanced settings. Hit OK. So this one, the bats are a little bit fainter, and the bats are flying out of the front of this building. So this could be a situation, and I did see some moths in the vegetation here. So where you can help exclude moths if they are actually smaller is you can use an exclusion size. So in addition to setting the size of the bat that you're looking for, you can filter smaller targets. So we could select this and say, filter really small targets. In this video, the bats are already fairly small. So there we go. So here's a bat that is leaving out of this roost in the attic. So I'll just show this workflow really quickly. Fortunately, I'm kind of running out of time, so I'm not going to have time to show all the things that I wanted to, but we have a lot more material on our website. So we could put a target diameter here. You can see the bats are already quite small in this case, so it's going to be hard to filter them based on size. But just to show off, there are a few more advanced settings. So you can filter targets also by brightness. So if the moths were relatively faint, sometimes you can filter those just based on your sensitivity. In other cases, you might want to boost your sensitivity to get more targets, but then you can filter the targets that are causing problems. Could be vegetation. This could be another way of dealing with vegetation based on brightness. So our brightness values go from 0 to 255. And so I can just show you there. You have this little tool that you can see the bat is pegged at white at about 255 here, whereas the background is somewhere around 30. So we could set a minimum brightness here at about 60. Now, unfortunately, I'm running out of time, and I do want to respect everybody's time, so I'm not going to be able to show everything I wanted to. I did want to show in here you can generate the review images. I didn't have a chance to demonstrate that, but this is where you would go if you want to make those. And you can make review images of single tracks, or you can do aggregates of different time intervals. So that's something we've just added there. And let me switch back to my PowerPoint here, just to kind of wrap things up. So we are excited to announce that we just released a wealth of new information on our website. If you go to ThruTrackerAnalytics.com/getting started, this has a lot of the information that we've talked about in these webinars and has it organized so you can step through. If you want to have intro on how to get started processing videos or how to film in the field, we have a whole bunch of new information on there. We have quizzes so you can practice. We're going to be rolling out different projects so you can get more practice with that. So please check that out if you're interested. And we're also, again, building out more cloud infrastructure for processing videos in the cloud. We're going to have a training academy where you can go through, and that will help organize all the training materials that you've gone through and point you in the direction. So we should be rolling that out within the next month or so. And we're also working on a citizen science program where people can do this at no charge. So these are things to keep an eye out for. And I would just wrap up by reminding people what we all know, which is that the work we're doing may not get a lot of publicity in some cases, but every roost that we're monitoring, it matters. Those data that we're able to collect is important to have quality. So I really appreciate everyone showing up and trying to learn these new methods. And I would just say, there is a lot that you can do. We have tried to make this professional grade software, so there are a lot of options and things that you can learn and do. But at the same time, as I said, we're trying to make this really easy to get started. So don't be intimidated by the options. Grab whatever cameras you have or can get access to and start playing around with it. And we can really start doing a lot, hopefully, in relatively little amount of time. So thank you to everybody who has come. And if people need to drop off, feel free to, but I'll also be happy to hang out a little bit longer this time and answer any more questions that folks have. Last thing is, please get in touch. Myself, Kristen, and Abigail, we're all available. Also, if you have videos or you just want somebody to kind of help train you one-on-one, we're happy to do those and schedule meetings if you want to talk about projects that are ongoing or things that you can do in the future. So my email is there, and yeah, please get in touch.
Awesome. The one question that we had kind of hanging out in the chat was the potential application for ectotherms.
For ectotherms, which ectotherms?
Not specified. Oh, frogs.
Frogs.
Northern
I don't
red-legged frogs, to be specifically.
I don't think you'd be able to see frogs on thermal. So you'd probably be wanting to use some other imaging techniques. Unfortunately, I don't really have experience trying to image frogs, so I cannot help with that question. Let's see. A lot of thank yous. Thank you to everyone. Looking forward to digging in with our new thermal binocs. Susan is talking about using a wildlife underpass. I wonder if that was, oh, that was in reference to the frogs. So I'm sorry, Susan. I would need to maybe get in touch and maybe we could talk about what we could do, but I don't have specific information on that one. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for the positive feedback. It looks like we are good there. So we're going to wrap it up and hope to see you all in the field.